Tonight, I want to tell you a quiet story about dream and destiny. It begins in a small town by the sea, on a night when the wind carried a strange whisper that no one else seemed to hear. Only one young man, standing alone on the pier, felt that something in the air was different. The town was called Merendon, a simple fishing town with narrow streets and houses of stone. By day, people mended nets, sold fish, and called to each other across the busy harbor. By night, the boats rested like sleeping animals on the dark water, and yellow lamps shone in a few small windows. In one of those houses lived Elias, a 19-year-old boy with tired hands and bright eyes. Every morning, before the sun rose, he helped his father carry heavy ropes and wet nets down to the boats. His clothes smelled of salt and smoke, and his skin was marked by the cold wind from the sea. To everyone in Merendon, Elias was just another dock worker, another strong back, another pair of hands. But inside, he carried a quiet dream that he almost never spoke about. He wanted to tell stories, big stories, about people, choices, and strange turns of fate. At night, when the town grew silent, he wrote short lines in a rough notebook by the light of a small candle. On this particular night, as the waves moved slowly under the moon, Elias closed his notebook and stepped outside. The air felt different, as if it was waiting for something. He did not know it yet, but this calm, cool night would be the last ordinary night of his life. Every morning in Merendon began with the same sounds: gulls crying in the gray sky, wooden boats knocking gently against each other, and men calling out as they prepared for another long day at sea. Elias woke before sunrise, as he always did, pulling on his worn coat and stepping into the cold air. His breath made small clouds as he walked toward the harbor. His father, Oren, was already there, rolling up nets with slow, heavy movements. Years of hard work had bent his back, and the sea had carved deep lines around his eyes. He did not speak much in the mornings, and Elias understood why. Their life depended on the success of each day's work, and the sea never promised anything. Together they loaded the boat, pushing against the wet sand. Elias worked hard, pulling ropes, tying knots, carrying baskets of fish when they returned. But even as he worked, his mind wandered to the stories he wanted to write. He imagined characters with brave hearts, strange journeys, and choices that changed their futures. Sometimes these thoughts came so suddenly that he forgot to answer when his father called his name. One afternoon, after hours of repairing torn nets, Elias hurried home to write before dinner. He lit his small candle and opened his notebook. The house was quiet, except for the soft whistle of wind through the window. Words came quickly, and he wrote with a kind of secret joy, until he heard footsteps behind him. Oren stood in the doorway, holding one of Elias's loose pages. "This again?" his father asked, tiredness in his voice. Elias tried to smile. "Just for a little while. It helps me think." But his father shook his head. "Thinking doesn't feed us. Stories don't fix nets." Elias reached to take the page, but Oren's rough fingers accidentally tore it down the middle. The paper split with a sharp sound. For a moment, both of them froze. That was the emotional contrast. A quiet evening suddenly broken by the sting of disappointment. Oren sighed and left the room. Elias sat alone, staring at the torn page in his hands. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. He wanted to help his family, and yet his dream refused to fade. He didn't know it, but this quiet discomfort was about to grow into something much heavier. The next few days passed slowly, like heavy clouds moving across the sky. Elias tried to focus on work, but something restless lived inside him now. Every time he looked at the torn page in his notebook, he felt a small pain, like a voice whispering, "You are losing time." One evening, as he walked home from the harbor, he saw a crowd gathered outside the old tavern. A bright red banner hung across the door. "Tonight only, Master Rowan, the traveling storyteller." People whispered with excitement. Rowan's name was famous. He was known for discovering new talent. Elias stopped in the street. His heart thumped. For years, he had dreamed of showing his writing to someone like Rowan, someone who might understand. He looked back toward his house where his father waited, expecting him to come home for supper. Then he looked again at the tavern door. It was here that Elias made his first mistake. He whispered, "Just tonight. He won't notice I'm late." Then he turned away from home and walked toward the tavern firelight. Inside, warm lanterns lit the wooden room. Rowan stood on a small stage, tall and confident, with gray streaks in his beard and a voice that filled every corner. Elias felt excitement rising in his chest. After the show, he waited nervously, holding one of his stories, rewritten on a clean page. When his turn came, he stepped forward. "Sir," he said softly, I write stories too." Rowan glanced at the page, raised one eyebrow, and let out a short laugh. "A dock boy who writes destiny tales? How charming. And how impossible." He handed the paper back without reading more than 2 lines. The words cut deeper than Elias expected. His cheeks grew hot. People in the tavern looked at him with curiosity, maybe even pity. That was the emotional contrast. The bright hope of a moment turned suddenly into embarrassment. Elias walked out into the night rain, the rejection echoing in his mind. "Maybe my dream is too big for someone like me," he thought. By the time he reached home, he was late. His father stood in the doorway, angry and worried. Elias tried to explain, but the words fell apart. They argued until the candle burned low. When Elias finally lay in bed, rain tapping against the roof, he told himself he still had time to fix everything. He was wrong. The storm arrived without warning. All day, the sky over Merendon had been strange, too still, too quiet, as if holding its breath. By late afternoon, dark clouds rolled in from the open sea, thick and heavy like mountains of smoke. Fishermen hurried to pull their boats onto shore. Doors slammed. Lamps were blown out by sudden gusts of wind. Elias and his father were still at the harbor, struggling to tie down the last boat. The waves rose higher and higher, smashing against the rocks with violent force. Rain began to fall sideways, sharp as needles. "Leave it!" Oren shouted over the wind, "We have to get home!" But Elias saw something that made his stomach twist. A small boat drifting far from the dock, its rope snapped. Its bow lifted dangerously toward the storm. It was their boat, their only boat. Before Elias could react, Oren ran toward the water, shouting for help. But the wind swallowed his voice. A huge wave crashed over the beach, and for a moment, Elias lost sight of his father completely. "Oren!" someone yelled. "Get back!" But his father didn't return. Elias searched through the rain, calling again and again. The world was a blur of gray water and broken rope. His heart pounded painfully. The argument they had, Rowan's cruel laugh, the ruined story page, all of it disappeared under one single fear. What if he lost his father tonight? Hours later, the storm finally softened, but Oren never came home. Neighbors tried to comfort Elias, saying the sea sometimes carried men to distant shores. Rescued fishermen often returned days later. "Wait," they said, "hope." But the house felt too quiet, too empty, too cold. Elias sat by the window, watching the waves in the dark. Guilt settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. If I hadn't chased my dream, if I hadn't left him alone tonight, that thought would not leave him. Just before dawn, Elias stood up, grabbed his small bag, and walked toward the edge of town. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay. He couldn't sit and wait, not anymore. He would search for answers. He would search for his father. And maybe he would search for himself. By the time the sun rose over the gray sea, Elias had already left Merindon behind. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Elias followed the coastal road with the sea always at his side, a long silver line stretching toward the horizon. At first, the walk felt strangely peaceful. The morning air was cool, and the cries of seabirds echoed above him. He told himself he would find news of his father in the next town, or the one after that. Hope carried him forward. But by noon, the sun burned hot, and the road grew rough. His shoes filled with sand. His bag felt heavier. Every sound, the wind, the waves, the rustle of bushes, seemed to whisper doubts. Still, he walked. On the second day, he reached a thick pine forest. Shadows covered the path, and cool air wrapped around him. For a moment, he felt comfort. But soon the quiet became too deep, too still. Branches cracked somewhere behind him. He turned quickly, heart racing, but saw nothing. He repeated to himself, "Just the forest, just the wind." Yet a cold feeling stayed in his chest. That night, Elias built a small fire and warmed his hands. The flames danced softly, giving him a rare moment of calm. He took out his notebook, hoping to write something, to remind himself who he was. But the page stayed empty. The words would not come. Then, in the darkness beyond the firelight, he heard low growling. Two yellow eyes appeared between the trees. Elias froze. Wolves! The fire snapped loudly, and the shadows jumped. His breath caught in his throat. He grabbed a burning branch and stood up slowly, his legs shaking. For a long, terrible moment, the wolves stared at him, testing him. Then, with a quick movement, they vanished back into the trees. That was the emotional contrast, a quiet moment of rest broken by sudden danger. Days later, exhausted and hungry, Elias reached a cliff overlooking the sea. There he met an old woman wrapped in a faded blue shawl. She sat on a rock as if she had been waiting for him. "You're searching for something," she said, her voice soft but certain. Elias nodded, too tired to argue. She pointed toward a distant shape rising from the water. "There," she whispered, "the Whispering Island." If destiny wants to speak, it speaks there. The island looked far, dark, and mysterious. Elias felt fear, but also a spark of hope. He didn't know it yet, but the hardest part of his journey was waiting beyond that dark stretch of water. Elias waited until sunset before stepping into the small wooden boat the old woman kept hidden behind the rocks. The ocean between him and the Whispering Island was dark and uneasy, moving like something alive. Every pull of the oars felt heavier than the last. The sky slowly turned silver, then blue, then black. As he approached the island, he saw no lights, no houses, no boats, only jagged cliffs rising from the water like the bones of some ancient creature. A narrow cave opening glowed faintly, as if lit from within. Elias's heart beat hard. This is it, he thought. I can still turn back. I can still pretend nothing happened. But he knew that wasn't true anymore. He climbed onto the rocks, breath trembling, and walked toward the cave. The air grew cold. As soon as he stepped inside, the sound of the ocean faded away, replaced by soft echoes, like whispers bouncing from wall to wall. The deeper he walked, the brighter the cave became. Pale blue light spread across the stone, glowing like moonlight trapped inside crystal. Elias stopped when he reached a wide chamber, and there, standing in the center, was a figure. At first, he thought it was a person, but as he stepped closer, he felt a strange chill run through him. The figure shifted, changed, and settled into a shape he recognized too well. It was him, a perfect shadow of himself. Same eyes, same face, same tired posture, but darker, heavier, weighed down by fear. Elias's breath caught. "What are you?" he whispered. The shadow spoke with his own voice, but colder. "I am the part of you that believes you will fail. I am every doubt you tried to ignore. I am the fear that pushed your father into the storm. You carry me wherever you go." The words struck him like stones. Elias felt his hands tremble. Maybe it's right, he thought. Maybe I am the reason everything went wrong. The shadow stepped closer. "Turn back," it said softly. "Forget the island. Forget your dream. Go home and let destiny be written without you." Elias closed his eyes. His heart was pounding so loudly he could hear it echo in the cave. For a moment, he felt small. Too small for destiny, too small for dreams, too small to change anything. But then another thought rose inside him, quiet but strong. "I'm afraid, but I still choose to move." He stepped forward, toward the shadow, toward the unknown. And in that single step, everything began to change. For a moment, Elias felt nothing. No sound, no light, no shadow. It was as if the cave held its breath. Then the blue glow around him began to shift, moving like smoke in slow circles. The shadow version of himself dissolved into the light, breaking apart like dust carried by wind. Elias reached out with one shaking hand. The light touched his skin, warm and soft, and suddenly he felt something rising inside him, something he had not felt in a long time. Strength. Clarity. A voice that felt unmistakably his own. Then the cave grew quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not lonely, not frightening, peaceful. He walked back toward the entrance, the echoes following him like a gentle reminder. When he stepped outside, the sky above the Whispering Island was bright with early morning colors. Gold, rose, and silver mixed like paint on water. The storm that had brought him here seemed far away now. Elias climbed into the boat and began rowing back. It was easier this time. The water felt calmer, as if guiding him instead of resisting. And though he said nothing aloud, he could feel a difference in himself. His thoughts were clearer, steadier. His fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him. When he returned to the mainland, he hurried along the shore road toward Merindon. His heart beat with hope he hardly dared to believe. And when he reached the edge of the town, he saw a small group of people gathered near the dock. At the center of the group was Oren, wet, tired, wrapped in a blanket, but alive. Elias ran forward, his legs almost giving out. His father turned, and for the first time in many years, Elias saw his eyes soften. Oren opened his arms, and Elias stepped into them, feeling the relief shake through his entire body. "I thought I lost you," Elias whispered. "You didn't," Oren said. "The sea pushed me far, but fishermen found me. I came home as soon as I could." As they walked back toward their small stone house, Oren noticed something different in his son's voice. Stronger, clearer, full of quiet certainty. And that became the twist of Elias's journey. The Whispering Island had not given him magic. It had simply revealed what was inside him all along. From that day on, when Elias told stories, on the beach, at the docks, in the market, people said they felt something powerful, something true, something that touched the heart like destiny itself. And in the soft glow of each evening, Elias finally understood. Sometimes the voice we search for is the one we find when we walk through fear. Elias was a young man from a small fishing town called Merindon. The sea was part of his life from the moment he could walk. Every morning he helped his father bring in the nets, and every night he wrote small stories by candlelight. He dreamed of becoming a storyteller, but he kept that dream hidden. In Merindon, people believed in strong arms, not strong imaginations. But Elias carried a quiet wish in his heart. And one evening, after a long day at the harbor, the wind felt different, like it was whispering to him. He didn't know it yet, but his life was already changing. The trouble began with a small problem. His father didn't understand his writing. He wanted Elias to focus only on work. Their arguments grew, and one night Elias made a choice. He went to a tavern to show his writing to a famous storyteller. But the man laughed at him, and Elias returned home embarrassed and late. Then came the storm. A sudden, violent sea pulled his father away from the shore. When Oren didn't return that night, fear wrapped around Elias's heart. He blamed himself, and before dawn he left Merindon, hoping to find answers beyond the town he had always known. His journey was long. He walked along the coast, through dark forests and rocky paths. He faced hunger, cold nights, and even wolves that circled him in the dark. But he also met an old woman who pointed toward the distant Whispering Island, a place, she said, where destinies spoke to those who were brave enough to listen. Elias went there. Inside a glowing cave, he faced something strange and frightening, a shadow version of himself, shaped by fear and doubt. The shadow told him to turn back, but Elias stepped forward anyway. He chose courage. The shadow dissolved, and Elias felt a new strength rise inside him, soft but steady, like a small flame protected from the wind. When he returned home, he found his father alive. And strangely, when Elias spoke, people listened in a new way. His words carried warmth, honesty, and something that felt like truth. Elias had searched for destiny on a faraway island, but destiny was inside him the whole time. My name is Elias, and this is the story of how I found my voice. I grew up in Merindon, a small town by the sea. Every morning I worked beside my father, pulling nets out of the cold water, smelling salt on my clothes, and listening to the waves. People thought I was quiet, but the truth is, I was always thinking. I loved stories. At night, when the house was dark, I wrote by candlelight, dreaming of a life that felt bigger than the harbor. But I kept those dreams hidden. I didn't want to disappoint my father. Everything changed the night I went to see the famous storyteller, Rowan. I believed he might understand me. I believed he might see something in my writing. Instead, he laughed at me. I can still hear it. The sound cut deeper than a knife. When I went home late, my father was angry, and I felt like I was slipping away from both my dream and my family. Then came the storm. The sea took my father that night, or at least that's what I believed. The guilt hit me like a stone. I couldn't stay in Merendon. I couldn't wait for news. So I walked away from the only home I knew, hoping the road would give me answers. Those days were hard. I walked until my legs shook. I slept under trees. I heard wolves in the dark and feared I might never see home again. But I also met an old woman who told me about the Whispering Island. She said destiny spoke there. And even though I was afraid, something inside me said, "Go." On the island, inside a glowing cave, I met a shadow that looked like me. My fear, my doubt, my weakness. It told me to turn back. I almost listened, almost. But then I took one step forward. That step changed everything. When I returned to Merendon, my father was alive. I ran to him with a heart full of relief. And strangely, when I spoke, people listened. It was as if my words carried something new, something that had been waiting inside me all along. I left Merendon searching for destiny, but destiny was already in my voice. And so, my friend, our story comes to a quiet end, like the last wave rolling onto the shore at night. Elias began as a young man who felt small, unsure, and afraid to disappoint the people he loved. He believed destiny was something far away, hidden on an island or waiting in another world. But as he walked through storms, forests, fear, and his own doubts, he discovered something simple and beautiful. Destiny is not a place. Destiny is a voice growing inside us little by little, every time we choose courage instead of fear. Elias didn't return home with treasure or magic powers. He returned with something stronger, clarity, a calm, steady understanding of who he was. When he spoke, people listened, not because the island changed him, but because he finally accepted the part of himself he had ignored for so long. Maybe that is how it works for all of us. Sometimes we look for signs, for special moments, for someone to tell us what we should be. But in many stories, and in many real lives, the answer is already inside, quiet, waiting. Like a soft whisper we hear only when we finally stop running from ourselves. One sentence moral. Sometimes the voice we search for is the one we find when we face our fear. If this story helped you relax, listen, and practice your English, I'm happy you were here tonight. Listening to stories is one of the easiest and most natural ways to grow your English and your confidence, step by step. And if you want more calm stories like this, you can like this video so I know you enjoyed it. You can also subscribe for more gentle English stories told with care. Which part of Elias's journey felt the strongest to you? You're always welcome here. Any night you want to listen, learn, or simply breathe for a moment. Thank you for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next story.